Today we'll start with Redux. So last time we have completed that expense manager. So now we'll learn core Redux, then Redux toolkit, and then we'll integrate that in that expense manager. So we'll see how to use that in that particular application. So we already covered that Redux core while learning use reducer hook. So previously we learned this. So let me uncomment all of this. So for before learning use reducer hook, we learn what is reducer, how to use Redux. So for that, you need to install that Redux npm package, that is the core library, and how to use that. So for that, you need to create that create store function to use, and for that function, we need to pass a reducer. So create store function accepts three parameters actually. First is reducer, second is the initial value, and third is the middleware, like extra functions reducer, extra functions that you want to add, functionality that you want to add. So the create store, we pass the reducer. So this is, it automatically receives state and action. So we define this initial state. So let me show you this main. Yeah, we have already uncommented out. Let's see. So you can see initially counter value is 0. So when we dispatch this action, so to change the reducer, we always need to call dispatch. And for that, we need to pass action. So this is known as action. It's an object with type property. So type is a mandatory. You have to pass the type and you give some name. So I want to increment or decrement. So based on that, whenever you call dispatch, the reducer associated with that particular store. So you are calling store.dispatch. So when you call dispatch by passing action, the reducer associated with that store will get called. So here you will check the action.type. So if it's increment, then you return a new state. So we don't modify the state or action because reducer is a pure function, as we have already discussed. So you don't modify state or action, you just use that state or action and return a new state. So as the initial state is an object, we are returning here an object by taking out the current value of the counter and incrementing it with the value that we are passing. So here I'm assigning a default value of 1. So count is by default 1 if you are not passing. So you can pass extra data if you want to pass to that particular function reducer. So if you don't pass, it's incremented by 1. So when you increment by 1, you can see you get this initially 1. So initially it's 0, then you get 1, then you increment by 3, so it becomes 4. Then again you decrement by 5, so it becomes -1. Let me zoom in. And then you reset. So reset, it becomes 0. And again decrement by 1, so it becomes -1. So that's how this increment decrement reducer code we added. Now we'll implement the same reducer and we'll see how to use in the actual application. So let's create a new application. Yes, core npm create with core Redux demo. Now there is a thing, so we need to first install all the packages. Let's remove all CSS. Let's remove the CSS file itself. And from here, remove this, everything else. Margin 0, padding 0, box sizing border. This is important. So your application will look same in all browsers. Some browsers add margin by default, which we don't want. Now here we are rendering app. Remove everything. You can create new one. You can run npm run dev. Start this application. So we'll again use random users API, results 10, and nationality US. So we'll see how to use API calls. So before using Redux, we'll do in normal way, how we do in React. So This is the app component we can use. So if you want to make any API call, you need to use effect. So first install Axios. So we can make API call. Use effect. So we don't want any dependency. So on component load itself, this code will be executed. I can say get users. It will be async function. I will add try catch, and here we can say const data equal to await axios dot get, and this is the URL. If there is error, we'll just log it to the console, and we can call this function get users, and whatever response we get, we can print that. We can see response contains results property. So it has results property and info. So we want results. So we can say data dot results. So we get this array of users. Now we can add that loading functionality. We also need to store this. I can say use state const, let's say is loading, set is loading equal to use state. Loading will be false initially. And we can say error message, set error msg should be empty. And we also need to store this user. So we can say users, set users equal to use state. Users will be empty array. Now I can say set users data dot results. So this is the users. Now before making the API call, we can set is loading to true. And once the API call is successful or failure, we can set is loading to false. So this finally will always execute even if it's success or if it's failure. So we don't need to repeat this at two places. So you can also do like this. So you don't need finally. So you can do like this. So even if it's success, set loading to false. Even if failure, set loading to false. But that's duplicate code. So you can remove this and add it in finally. Now, if there is error message, we need to set this error while getting list of users. Try again later. And yeah, so error message, everything is done. Here we can display. So if is loading, display loading. If there is error message, display that error message. Otherwise, we'll display those users. So you can say users dot map for individual user. We need to return. So what we need to display? So we need to display name, name dot first last, email, and phone. So we can let's declare this as unordered list. We can display this li name. So this will be the individual user. So users is this entire array. Individual user is an object. So we can use that user dot name dot first. So is the user dot name dot first and last. So this will display that user name. So you can see name is getting displayed. So this is list of 10 random users. So I can say name, email, the user dot email, and phone. This is getting displayed. Let's add some class here, users list, and here I can say dot users list with 600 pixel, margin top bottom 0, left right auto. So it's in the center, and I don't want styling, list style none, so there will not be bullets. li is added, and we can also display photos. So there is a photo, so key is required. So each of these particular user has a login.uuid, which you can use, or you can also use ID. Let's use login.uuid equal to user.login.uuid. We get these 10 users. Refresh. We are not, yeah, we are not printing. So each user has a picture.medium. So we can display that. So let's declare a new div, image src equal to user.picture.medium. So we are repeating this user.user. So we can destructure here directly. So I can destructure login, picture, name, email, and phone. Now I don't need this user dot everywhere. So this is the simplified one. Now image, whenever you display image, you always need alternate text. What will be alternate? I can say user. Let's see. You can see the image is getting displayed. So let's display image and this information side by side. So for this, we can give class user list item. So inside user list, we have user list item. Always use at least one parent. So this will not collide with any of the other CSS. So this will be display flex. So when you make it flex, this will be side by side. Now I don't want this name, email, everything side by side. What I want side by side, only this one. So what happens? So when we declare this as a display flex, all of these will be displayed side by side. That's why you see this like this. But I just want this image and all other content on this particular side. So we can declare that inside a div. Now what will happen? Direct child will only be side by side, and these will not be side by side. So now you can see only the images on the left side. So for this image, you can also give class name user image, user list item, user image, width 50 pixel, height 50 pixel, border radius 50%. So that will display round. So this is round. Let's also decrease the font size for the entire body, 16 pixel. 14 pixel. These are also too big, 12 pixel. Okay, fine. Now we can display them some borders here. User list item. So we can say border pixels and padding 10 pixel top bottom, left, right. Let's make this left 5 and 3. So we can add here, let's add margin. Can also add border radius here, 5 pixel. So they will be rounded. So this is the list of users. Let's add some margin here. So after image, you can say margin right, 5 pixel. This is better. Let's make it 10 pixel. So we have all these users and we are displaying them correctly. So if we see initially we see this loading, let's add loading class, text align center, font size 20, spacing 1 pixel. So it will be why, oh, we need to give that class for loading. class name error msg. So you should practice this, like creating your application, how to make styling. So when you are going for interview, there will be technical round. So you need to complete one application. See, this simple application you need to complete within 1 hour, all the styling and all these things. So you should have practice. Then only you will be easily understand how to do that, and it will be easy for you. So you need to understand what you need to do. So get that user. So you need to make XUS API call, then you need use effect and all these things. You should think how you should do that. So it will be color red. This, so give us a message. So loading, you can see loading is displayed, and then we have error. So if there is error message, we can throw this error. So we can simulate that error. So when you throw error, this code will not be executed, catch will be executed. So you can see error while getting list of users. Now, if I remove this, you can see this message is still there. Even the users are loaded. Let's give font size smaller, 18 pixel. Error message is too big. So we don't want this error message when data is loaded. That's why it's important. So even if the error message is set to empty initially, if you display this error message, so next time API is called, you need to reset that error message. So set error message to empty. And you can also set this if you are displaying some success message, that also you will be displaying. So now you can see that is not displayed, and if I throw error here, now you will see that error. But if I remove this, you will not see. Why? Because now I have removed that. So again API call is made and you are setting it to empty. So that's why even though it's empty, you need to reset it to empty, because if this error message is displayed first time, then again you are making API call, you are not resetting that. So error message is displaying, success message displaying, users are also getting loaded. So this is normal application without using any Redux library. So let me do one thing. So we can initialize this Git repository. So this is committed. So now we don't have any changes. Now we can use Redux. So we'll implement the same using Redux. So we need to install Redux. So here we are using core Redux, not Redux toolkit. So to use that, first we need to create a store. So I can create a store folder. So let's go one by one. Yeah, first create the store folder. Inside it, we can create store.js. Now we can create store equal to create store from Redux. So this is not how we import from Redux. So sometimes the suggestion is not correct. Import, you need to remember how you import. So that require either Node.js syntax. So you are using import syntax. So you need to use import, create store. Now for this create store, you need a reducer. So we can create a reducer folder here. You can call it reducer. So if you have multiple reducer, you can store that in this folder only. And here I can say users reducer dot jsx, or you can call js or jsx. So it deals with users, and use it camel case, so it's easy to find out. Don't just say reducer or users. Now we can create that users reducer. As we have seen, reducer will automatically receive state and action, and we always use switch case. So action dot type. So based on that, we do something. So if case is, let's say I'm getting those users, so it will be get users, and I want to do something, and this will be default case. So we just return state as it is. So what will be the initial state of value of state? So if you see that functional component, so here we initialize an initial value. So it here it's object. Now what will be in our case? So our case, this is an array. So this is an array of users. So our case, the state will be initial value of empty array. So you can also use it here or you can store it here. Initial state, users state, initial state. So the advantage of this is that you can have more than one values. So instead of directly storing this as an array, what we'll do is we'll store this. So if you go to app, what we need loading state, error message state, and this user state. So we can store all of this inside this reducer. So let's start with empty array. So we'll do that later. So we'll directly store all this in the array. So now whenever we create store, we need actions. So what are the actions? So this is the action. So instead of creating this and passing it every time during dispatch, it's common to create a functions which will return that. So instead of directly dispatching this increment, we can create a function like increment, and this function will return this particular object. So this is known as action generator or action creator functions. Now instead of passing this object, we pass this increment function, call this increment function. So when we call this increment function, what it will return? It will return an object, this object. So it's exactly same, just that you don't need to always manually type this. You just call this function and it will return that object. So when you are returning object from function, you don't have anything else. So you can use implicit return syntax. So you can just wrap this in curly bracket like this. So this is exactly same as writing this. So this code and this code is exactly same. Let me comment this out so it will be formatted. So both are exactly same. So here we are creating a function which returns an object. So if you don't want this extra curly bracket return statement, you can return implicitly because this is arrow function. You don't need anything if you are using arrow function. So if I directly say hello, this will be implicitly returned hello. But as it's an object, so if I open curly bracket, that means it's function body implicitly. So that's why you need to wrap this in round bracket. So now this increment function returns an object, empty object. I don't want empty object, I want this object. So I will return this object. I don't want this. So this is how you can implicitly return. You can also write it on one line. So this is the advantage of implicit return. So you can have one increment function, you have decrement function. Here you see decrement like this. So these are known as action creator or action generator functions that just returns the action. So you don't have to manually type this all the time. So if I want to increment, you don't need to manually type. So instead of creating them directly here, you can create functions here. src actions folder, and here you can create users actions .js. It's there is no React code here, so that's why we are saying JS. Here also it's not React, so you can just say JS. So you are not returning any JSX here. It's normal function. So here we can create function. You can say, so what is the function? Get users. So I can say get users is a action. Get users action. So it's a function that will return object with type get users. Now I can export this. Now inside this will just return that state action dot payload. So as we have seen here, whenever you return something, so here I am returning this object. So this object will become new state. So whatever you return from the reducer, that will become a new state. So here also, whatever I am returning, that will become new state. So as we are returning, you don't need break here. If you are not returning, you always need break. So now whatever I am passing for this reducer will be returned as it is. So that will become new state. So now inside this store, I can use this users reducer. Now we need to export this. and we can add store.subscribe. This is just for us to see the state. Store.getState. So this is the same code we have here. Store.getState. So whenever reducer get called state updates, this code will be executed. So now this is the store. We can export this. Export default store. Now I want this store as our main Redux store for the entire application. So in this app.jsx, let's go to main. Here we can use provider component. So if I want to access that store for the or provide the store for the entire application, you need another library, React Redux. So this is library specific to React. If you just install Redux you can use in Angular, JavaScript, or framework, you can use Redux. But this React Redux is specific to React. So you can access that store directly in any of the component. So once it installed, what you can do, you can use the provider component. So this is from React Redux. So now just like context provider, we have this provider from React Redux. So just like value prop, you have store prop. So this is a mandatory prop. And you need to provide the store that you are creating. So this is the store that we have created by passing this users reducer. And this is the reducer. So as we are using this constant, I think we have seen now. So it's easy to make this typo, like typing mistake. So instead of this, I can write this wrong letter. And this action will not make any change because there is no matching increment. So it will return that initial state or default state what it is. So it's always good to create constants for these strings. So you will not be manually typing this and you will not make typing mistake. So now instead of creating get users, you can create one more constants, utils constants.js, export const get users. So this is the constant. Now this is the same constant we need to use everywhere. So you will not manually type this and you will not make typing mistake. So I can directly use in reducer here. Import this. Now anytime I dispatch this particular action with this particular type, this particular code will get executed. Now here we have provided this store. Now inside this opening bracket and closing bracket, whatever you have, all the components, so direct app or their child component can access that store value. So how it will be able to access that store value? So this app component, you can define a function. So normally instead of exporting the app component, you need to export default connect. Connect is again from React Redux. So you need to connect your app component to the Redux store. You call this connect and again you call it. And for that second parameter, you need to pass your component name. So this is your component name. And you pass this as a parameter. So this is known as connect is a higher order component. So we'll see how it is higher order component. So, but this is the syntax. So higher order component is used to modify or return a new modified version of the component. So you pass this app component and now this connect with method will return a new component that you are exporting as a default. So now whenever you connect your component, now you can access whatever data you want to access. So you can declare new function map state to props. So it's you can call it anything, but it's generally called as map state to props. And here it will automatically receive that state value. And you need to pass this function as the first argument. So now connect you are calling twice. So first time you call it, you will pass this map to state props, and this will return something. And you again call it by passing app. So now this state will be the actual store state. So whatever store you are passing, you will get it here. So I can print store state. You can see store, it's an empty array. So what is the initial state of that particular reducer? So we are passing store here. And what is store contains? Store contains this reducer and its initial value is empty array. So if I type here name Mike, that will be the initial value of that particular store. You can see store is now one object with name Mike. So you have access to this particular store. Now what you need from that store? So you need entire store. So as it is whatever you are returning. So you can return a new object from here. And I can say users. So state, you can directly pass that state. State is the entire array. So I am returning an object from map state to props, and that will be automatically passed to this app component. And inside this app component, I can access this, whatever I'm returning as a prop. So this, with this name, I will get this users prop. So now here, once you have that data, you can dispatch. So how you will get dispatch? So we have seen here, I think dispatch. So store has a dispatch method. You can use that. Or there is another way, like whenever you connect your component. So this app component is connected now. So whenever you connect your component to Redux store, you automatically get dispatch prop here along with users. Now you have dispatchers. You can print this if you want what it contains. Const equal to props. Comment this out. Can rename this new users. Props. So if I refresh, you can see props contains two things: the users array and the dispatch. What is users? So this users is what we are returning from map state to props. So this map state to props is a function which will automatically get store value. So what is the store value? Currently it's an empty array. Empty array. So that you are getting it here. You can call it store or anything. But here you will get that store value, which is the state, and that you are returning as an object here. You are calling it users. You can even call it state, whatever you want. But as it's these are users, I am calling it users. So whatever object you are returning, that properties will go as a props inside this connected component. So now you have access to users and dispatchers. Here you can see you have dispatch function. So you don't need to call get that store and then store.dispatch. It's not needed. So here you can directly call dispatch. And what you need to dispatch? Get users. So where is our actions? User actions. Get users action. Get users action. So you need to call this. So this is a function which returns an object. So whenever you dispatch this action, reducer will get called. So this with that particular exact name, reducer will get called. So here I can use that get users import. So it's exactly same get users. So now with that particular name, we have defined reducer. So this case will execute and whatever you are passing. So I am passing this action.payload. So here I need to pass. This is action. So I can pass that data.results. So data.results I am passing to this function. I can call it data or I can call it users. And here I can say what is the name I have given? Action.payload. So here I can say payload users. So this is action. It contains payload property and whose value will come from this. So you can also call it payload if you don't want to confuse, and you can use it here. So as the key and value are same, you can just remove this. So whenever you dispatch this particular action with this get users name, get underscore users name, reducer will get called, this will get called, and whatever you are returning will be new store value. So if I refresh props, now you can see props is an array. It contains 10 users. So store gets updated and you have Redux store. So here we have Redux. So you can see here we are not getting anything because as we have seen previously, you need to configure Redux tools. go here. You can watch the use reducer hook video. Before that, we have discussed all of this. So you need to install this, configure it. So you can just copy this line, and here you can add this. So with this added, now you will be able to see that store data. Now you can see, zoom out. So state contains this particular entire list of 10 users. So store is updated now. Now whenever we make this API call, we are storing that data in this particular component. So the store gets updated with all of these users. Now I can access these users. So now the store is updated. We can move this part into separate component. So we can create components folder, users.jsx. And here we can pass that users the prop. You can pass it here, users equal to users. So what we are doing, we don't need this set users now. Let me remove this. So what we are doing in the use effect, we are making API call, setting is loading to true, make API call, we get that data, then we are calling this dispatch function. So we are dispatching this particular action. Which action? Get users action. So whenever you dispatch this action, the corresponding type, what is type, that will be executed from the reducer. And what you are doing, you are just returning whatever you are passing. So you are passing this payload, which is actual data. So get user action gets called with the actual users array. So now let me remove this. Now how you will get that data? So when the reducer get updated, you will have that information, and we are not storing in this array. So you are already using this map state to props, which is the props that you are getting. So this is the users props. So now users is the actual user that are coming from the store. So if you refresh, you can see it still works. So I have not used that array, users array. So what happens? Initially, you are taking users. Let me use inline destructure. So whenever you create a component and you are connecting, so you are using connect method. This is a higher order component. So you need to write this in this particular syntax. So first is a function that will automatically receive the state. And here you need to define what data you need in that particular app component. So you pass that component as a second function call. So what data you need in this app component, you return that data by selecting from the state. So that data users will come as a prop now. So whenever the store gets updated, so store or Redux store gets updated, this component will be re-rendered. So component, app component is connected to Redux store. Whenever the store gets changes, this app component will automatically get re-rendered. Use effect. Dispatch. Get user actions. Whenever you connect your component to Redux store using this connect method, this component will automatically get re-rendered whenever the store changes. So if you have multiple components that are connected to the particular store, all of these will get re-rendered. So what I'm doing initially, when the component is loaded, I am dispatching this particular get user action by passing this array. So initially, what is the array? It's empty. In the reducer, this is empty. But when you dispatch action, now it will become this array. And after that, you will get that data, let's say 1000. After that, you will get that data, you are dispatching this particular action with a new data. So your component will again re-render and you will get that updated data. Medium users. Yeah, here we are rendering something. So let's remove this. So you can see initially store is empty, then it becomes this, and then this becomes 1000 users. So whenever the store gets changed, your component will automatically get re-rendered with the new data. So that's the advantage of connect method. So in the connect method, whatever you data you need from the store, you can directly access here. So now we have separate state for loading and error message. So you can move that inside this reducer. As I said, initial state, we use this array empty. Now we'll use that object. Now it has is loading property, initially false, error message, it will be empty initially, and the data property, which will be an actual array. Now whenever you get this data, what you return, this is initial state is object, so you return object, and in this you set is loading. So now you don't have a way to identify whether it's loading or not. So what you can do, you can create two more states, two more actions. So go to actions. Here I can success action, or request. Get users request action, request. So you'll understand, I will explain it again so you'll better understand it. Get users success, get users error. So these are three action constants we have created. And where are our actions? Get users request. So I can implicitly return this by wrapping this in round bracket. So get users request action, get users success action, success. In success, you will get this. In request, you will set that loading, and failure. What is the, it should be failure. Failure action. So during failure, you will not get that payload. And again, return this. You can do the same here. So whenever I display this particular action with type get users request, what I need to do, I need to change is loading to true. So if you see here, before making the API call, I will display that is loading action. So inside the reducer, I can define this case, get users request. So whenever the request action is of this type, I will return object. I will make is loading to true, error message to empty, and I will spread out all the properties of state. So I don't need to update every property. So now this is for request, this is for success. So during success, what will happen? I will spread out all the properties of state. I will set is loading to false, because before making the API call, I have made it true. Now once I get that data, I will make it false. Error message will be empty. And now we have another case, get users error or failure. So during failure, what we will return? We will spread out all the properties. So you don't want to lose that data that's coming. So this is another property of this. That's why we are spreading out. So only the property that you want to update, that you are updating. All other property will remain as it. So during failure, is loading will be false. Error message will be empty. Error message will be error while getting list of users. Try again later. So this is your reducer now. Now we have moved all of this loading state, so you don't need it here. Let me remove this. This was just to show you. Now I will dispatch that get users request action. So this is the function that we have created. It just returns an action with this particular type. So whenever you dispatch this action, reducer will get called, and that corresponding case with this type will be executed. So it will execute this type, and what we are doing, we are changing is loading to true, error message empty, and we are not doing anything with data. So data will remain empty array. Now in success, so go back. So now user action success action, you are passing the data. So you are getting that data, and whenever you dispatch this action with this particular type, reducer will get called with matching this type. So in reducer, whenever it matches this, your setting is loading to false, error message to this, and data we need. So action dot payload. So don't need to spread it here. We are spreading all the properties. So actually it's good to spread it. So even if we are setting three properties, all three properties, it's always good to spread out. Why it's good? So later if you try to add new state here, let's say profile info, it's an object. So later if you add some more properties, then you don't need to change it here. So you are already spreading, so it will work correct. Otherwise if you don't spread, then you will lose this profile info value, because you are returning this object only. So only three properties you are returning, so this will be lost. So it's always good to spread out all the properties, even if you are setting all the properties. So now action data will be action dot payload. So we are setting all the properties, action dot payload. So whenever you display this action, you are passing the payload, that will automatically go as a action dot payload. Now during failure, you can just dispatch failure action, and you don't need anything. So when you dispatch this particular action, the corresponding reducer will get called, and you are setting is loading to false and error message to what. So now you don't need this. This is loading is set to false immediately. So here, whenever you get this success, so whenever you are dispatching this is loading, you are setting it to false. You don't need to do that in finally now. So this is fine. So now what will happen? Here you are getting that state. Now state is not an object. It's not an array. So if I refresh this, what is state? Now state is this entire object. So what I'm printing, store is this object. So it contains data property. Now users array will be state dot data. So state contains data property, and we are accessing is loading. So I also need is loading, state dot is loading. So this state contains is loading and error message. So whatever data you need from store, you can directly return this from map state to props that you need to pass to connect. So state dot error message. So all of these, whatever you are returning from this function, you will get them as a prop. So I have access to users is loading and error message as a prop. You also have dispatch access, because this component is connected to store. So now I can uncomment this, users import this. You can see you get this list of 10,000, 1,000 users. Let's decrease it to 10, so it will not take much time. So if I refresh, you can see initially you see loading and you get this list of 10 random users. So if you go to Redux store, you can see initially you send this request. In that case, what is the state? Is loading is true. Error message empty, data is empty. When you send success request, then is loading will become false, error is empty, and you have this data. So if I throw error here, so what will happen? You send this request. So this time is loading is true. Now you throw this error. So catch will execute. Now inside this, what you are doing? You are sending this get failure request. So inside this, so whenever you dispatch this action, this reducer case will get executed. So you are setting is loading to false. So initially with request is was true. Now it's false and error message will be set. So I will save this. Now you can see it was set to, let me rephrase this. So first request is sent, loading true, error message is empty. So this is the initial state. Now if the API is failed, now is loading is false, error message is set, data is there. So now you don't need this, all of this information inside this particular component. So you don't need that state, is loading, error message. So you have moved that directly in the store. So what is the need of store? Store is a centralized state. So now you don't have state directly in the component. You can have that in component if you want, but this is a common state you want to access from many components. So in that case, you use this Redux. So your application is larger. You don't use Redux just to store that information. If your application is larger, then you should use Redux, because you can directly access this data inside any of the component by just using connect method. So you don't need to pass any of the data as a prop to any of the component. If some component needs store data, you can just use connect method and you will get that data. So store is the single store. In Redux, you have single store. So inside this store, you have single store with one reducer. You can have multiple reducer also. So we'll see, we have expenses and profile information. They are separate, they are not related to each other. So we'll be having multiple reducers. So once we integrate this, you will see that. But this is how you can use core Redux to get information from the API and store that data, whatever data you want, inside this state. So you can also see difference. What was that previously and now? So previously, to initially it was false, you set it to true. When you set make request, in success it's become true to false. So you can also see the state. So the Redux dev tool is very important. By default, it does not show you all of this information. So you need to configure that by just adding this line of code. If I remove this, refresh, you will not see that. You can see no store found. Make sure to follow these instructions. So it will go to the same code that we have got. So if your store is simple store with single reducer, you can just add this line and it will be done. So once you add this code, you will see that data inside this particular Redux store. So you have all the data. So that's how you can use this reducer. So let me again explain you, close all, so you'll better understand. So this is the app component. This is the main JSX file. So we wrap our entire application inside provider. So provider is from React Redux. So if you want to access store data, you need to use provider from React Redux. So all the component direct child as well as their child component can directly access that store data. So this is the store that you need to pass. So for the store, you need to use create store function and pass the reducer that you have. Inside this reducer, you will automatically get state and action. So and you need to define the initial value. It can be array, it can be object, whatever. And every time you match some case, you need to return that value. Don't modify state or action. So you are returning. So initial state is object, so you are returning object. So whenever I am calling get users request, so before making the API call, I am dispatching this get users request action. So I can directly pass this also. So I don't need to call this, I can directly pass this. So I am dispatching this action just like we are dispatching here, store.dispatch. I can do this, but it's always good to create functions. So if you are using this multiple times, you don't need to find out what to pass. It's also easy to make typos. So that's why we create constants here. So let's import this. That's why we create constants with exact same name. So if you make typos here, it does not matter because this is the name that you are using everywhere. So even if I refresh, you can see it still works. But if you make typos while sending that API, like dispatching, instead of sending this get users request, so with this it will work because you are sending that correct name. But if I make this wrong, you will not see loading because loading will only be displayed if you send this correct type. So dispatch reducer will get called. Whenever you dispatch, reducer will get called. It checks if this state matches, case matches? No. It will directly go to default and it will return the current state. So that's why typos are not easy to find. It's not, you will not be able to easily find if you have made some mistake. So that's why it's always good to create constants. Those constants you reuse everywhere whenever you want to dispatch this action. So now you will see loading initially because you are correctly sending this. So if I here, instead of directly passing this action, you can just call that function get users action request action. So this is doing the same thing. It's returning an object with type property. So you don't need to manually do that. So this is all the boilerplate code you need when working with core Redux. So that's why it takes some time to set up all of this, and all of these issues are solved by Redux toolkit. So in Redux toolkit, you don't need to create these actions, you don't need to create these constants, you don't need this reducer with all of these states, request, success, failure. So Redux toolkit makes it easy. So but you need to understand this core Redux, and in the company projects, Redux toolkit is latest, it's not older one. So your project is still using this core Redux, not the Redux toolkit. So if you want to move from Redux core Redux to Redux toolkit, you need to understand these basics. Whenever you dispatch action, a reducer will get called, and exact with same type, that case will be executed and you will be returning, doing something. When you return something, reducer will get updated. Your store will get updated. So whenever the store changes, whichever components connected to that store will get re-rendered, and you will, this function will be executed and you will get new values of state. So whenever the state changes, this app component will re-render, this function will get executed, whatever props changed value of store, you will get that as a prop to this particular component, and you can access this. So you can avoid this API call directly here also. We'll see that in Redux Thunk. So we'll see that tomorrow. So that is the correct way of making API call. So if you want to make any API call, you don't use use effect hook here, you use Redux Thunk, which is specifically designed to make asynchronous API calls. So we'll see that tomorrow. Any question in this?
Yogesh, it's a little bit difficult to ask, understand. I mean, flow, I will see this video again once and then I can raise some question because.
So first watch the video of use reducer where I have explained core Redux.
Okay.
So you have, means you forgot that, that's why you are not able to match that and understand it. First watch that video of only the core Redux, not use reducer part. What is core Redux, how action dispatch, then come here, then watch this video, then you will understand what we are doing. So instead of doing all this in a single file, we have separated out everything. So this create, store and subscribe, it was in single file. Now we have moved it to separate store file, store.js. So we have moved this entire code here and we are exporting that store. This reducer function, all of this we have moved to separate reducer function, reducer file. So once you see this video, previous video, you will understand this.
Yes, the increment decrement one I understood. New here was the map to connect whatever we did.
Yes, that is a higher order component. So you just need to, instead of exporting the app component by default, you use just connect. So instead of using app, you just use connect.
So what if I want to have the same data in the store to be accessible in the another component? So I need to connect
that.
it
Yes.
in that component.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So whenever you use connect method, that component will have access to whatever data stored in that particular store.
So while exporting, we are, whenever that, in this case, whenever app will re-render, this map state to props will get called.
Yes.
And from where this will get.
So whenever the Redux store changes, so whenever somewhere in your application, you call dispatch. So whenever in your application, you call dispatch, store will get updated. And all the components connected to that store will get re-rendered. So this app component is connected. So how it's connected to store, because in map you have main file, you have this added this provider and you have specified this store. So all the component direct child components, all the components will be able to connect to this particular store.
So store will be always one,
Yes,
and reducers will get changed
you
according
can
to
have
whatever we
multiple
pass.
reducers. So right now we have only one thing you are storing, so we are having only one reducer. So as the cases will get increased, it's difficult to identify what's changing. So that's why it's good to create separate reducers. So if you have multiple cases, multiple things you are storing. So if I'm storing profile information, so you will be first loading that. Again, you have loading, then you have success, then you have failure. So your file will get larger and it's difficult to identify where are the actual cases for profile and where are the cases for this data. So that's why we always create separate reducer, and those will be combined using there is combined reducer. In store, we have combined reducers. This is from Redux. So you pass object. So right now I'm dealing with users. So I say users reducer. If you are dealing with profile, I say profile reducer. So this is how you can have multiple reducer in your application, but store is single store. In Redux, you have only one store, but multiple reducers you can have.
Okay, got it. But
You need to practice watch this video.
maybe yes.
Yeah.
So
So this is one way, like this is older way of attaching map dispatch props. So latest
okay,
ES5 Redux, they have improved a bit.
okay,
So you can use, instead of exporting this as connect, hooks, Redux hooks came, they have added one more hook to directly access this. But this is the code that you will see in your application projects, in the company projects. But they have improved, so you don't need to connect and use map to straight to props. So now inside this app component, you can directly use selector hook from React Redux. So now whatever state you are passing, getting inside map state to props, you will get it here. And from this, you can return whatever you want. So I will just return entire state and I will destructure. So you can do like this, const is loading equal to state dot is loading. So you can do like this, state dot error message. You can do like this, but instead of this, you have multiple properties. So you can just return the state as it is, and you can destructure here. So what it contains is loading, error message, and data property. So data, we are not using data here, we are using users. So you can rename this data to users. Or if you want, you can use data. First, let me show you. Now you don't need this. You just get this dispatch. So dispatch also you are not getting now because you are not connecting. So you can use that use dispatch hook. Const dispatch. So using hooks makes it really easy. So now this is exactly same. Go refresh here. You can see it still works. So loading, you can see loading is displayed and everything is working. If I throw error here, you will see that error message. You can see error message is displayed. So it's exactly same. Now this is much simpler. So you just normally export app component, use selector instead of that connect method. And you directly get the data, whatever there in the state. So this is the better way and recommended way. So when you write your next code, but older code that you have in company projects are still using this way. So you can decide which one to use, but you should know how to use this. So you can also, we'll see that tomorrow. So you can, in addition to this, you have map dispatch to props also. Another function that you define, and instead of manually calling dispatch like this, you can dispatch those functions. So we'll see that tomorrow.
okay.
So you can go through this video. So how much is completed from the expense list? You have watched all the videos?
I'm on edit expense and delete expense stuff.
Okay.
Hmm.
So you are too far.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm too far actually. But I'm going slowly actually. I'm
Yeah,
trying
go
to
slowly because you
uh,
have all the videos, so you can.
yeah, I'm trying first from I mean myself and
Mm,
going that way. I
yeah,
mean,
fine.
yeah, I'm trying myself. If not, then I'm referring to video.
Yes.
And I'm actually writing the code like use effect and this twice actually to, just to be hands-on on the syntax as well.
Mm,
Because the curly bracket and the round
mm,
bracket and this, uh, that needs to be
yes.
uh,
Practice.
clear. Hmm.